I'm here on Hope for Film Substack with the Oscar nominated. Oh, oops. Actually, you are Oscar nominated. So
I
let's be.
am, yeah, it's
Thank
fine.
you. Oscar nominated for Edge of Democracy, documentary film director Petra Costa from Brazil. And right now we're focused on her latest film, which is called Apocalypse in the Tropics. Both this film and her previous Oscar nominated film are on Netflix, and another film of hers called Elena, which she'll tell us about. But I just want to also point out that this new film, Apocalypse in the Tropics, is Oscar shortlisted, and Petra's been traveling the world with it and is an incredibly busy person. So we're really lucky to have her and happy to see you. Thank you for joining us, Petra.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Vanessa. It's an honor. And yes, pleasure to be here with you in conversation.
Truly, I hope people understand that the last two films you've made are masterpieces. I mean, there's nothing like them. It's extraordinary, actually, that they're on Netflix. And what you've done is chronicle Brazil's democratic unraveling in The Edge of Democracy. And now you turn to the question of when does a democracy end and a theocracy begin? So I imagine there was a moment or a turning point that convinced you this film about evangelical power, Apocalypse in the Tropics, was the next chapter you needed to explore?
Yeah, so I came to filmmaking through theater and then anthropology. And in my first film, Elena, I think is much of the elements that fascinate me in film. It's a very personal film about love and grief. And it's basically my search for my sister's story, who I lost when I was 7. And so I explore the pain of losing a sister. And little did I know that I would continue even to follow these traumas, but not on a personal level, but in a national level. I feel that I've been documenting the trauma of losing one's democracy, which is like a sibling to me in many ways, because I was born at the same time as Brazilian democracy and felt that it was my birthright. From a lifetime of my parents' fight against the military dictatorship, which lasted 21 years in Brazil. And then, yeah, it was very hard to establish Brazilian democracy. And it was very disturbing, as I say in The Edge of Democracy, to in my 30s see it crumble. Apocalypse in the Tropics takes that one step further, and it's like, not only am I scared of losing my democracy and becoming possibly an authoritarian government, but a theocratic authoritarian government, right? Which is this shadow that kind of hangs over not just Brazil, but Hungary, the United States, India, Russia, and so many countries right now. Because what I've discovered making this film is that the religious fundamentalism performs a miracle for the far right, because the far right usually defends the interest of a very small group of white men. And what religious fundamentalism does is give the miracle of giving public support, like working class support to these men.
We need you to look at our country and make this film here right now. I feel like it couldn't be more critical, more important to understand what you manage in Apocalypse in the Tropics, which is you trace the entanglement between evangelical leaders and the state, from Presidents Lula and Bolsonaro to a powerful televangelist who sees himself as a political puppeteer. It's really amazing what access you gained and how rare it is and how willing these people are to give you their full story. And they feel like ideologically opposed figures. So how did you observe this? How did you gain this access and show us so clearly how this power is circulating among them?
Well, it's been 10 years of documenting Brazilian democracy, and since the beginning I was very inspired by this Chilean documentary trilogy, which I imagine you have seen, called The Battle of Chile by Patricio Guzman. And what fascinated me about that trilogy is basically that he is able to film, and sometimes it was his crew filming, and other times it was like TV footage that he got access to, in the streets, in Congress, and in the presidential palace. So it feels like this X-ray of society, and that you have really a pulse on society when it's at such a crisis like at the verge of a coup. Um, and and that's what I wanted to do in both these films, of Democracy and Apocalypse in the Tropics, which I see kind of like a diptych. And and so my desire in both these films was to be able to be in these three spheres, like streets, Congress, and presidential palace. And in The Edge of Democracy, after 7 months, we managed to get access to Lula, and it took many no's, and until one moment where I decided to I got a meeting at his office. I went there and stayed there waiting the entire day, 12 hours. And his wife came, and I said, "Can I join you both in the car to this rally that you're going?" And she said, was how I managed to get access to Lula for the first time. And then in this film, when he was released from prison, immediately I asked for an interview, which was only granted a year and a half later, 4 days before the election. And thankfully, he canceled the first day, and then the next day we received in his house vibe, which you feel in the interview. With Bolsonaro, I filmed with him when he was the most available congressman. Well, he was still a congressman before he won the presidency. Then he decided to no longer speak to the press, only the evangelical news channel. And we managed to film with him through Malafaia, the televangelist, when he visits him in the presidential office. And Malafaia, it was my producer's suggestion to interview him. And as soon as we did that, we saw that it was worth like following him through time. And he's someone who's like speaking to the press. He does it often into all kinds of press. What was amazing, though, was that in the beginning, he was just one of many allies of Bolsonaro. And as time passed, we filmed him for almost 4 years, he became the main one. Others died, others fought with him, to the point, as you see in the film, he's like writing the president's speech.
It's funny, I also studied anthropology, and now I have to see this Chilean trilogy because I haven't seen it yet, and I have a good friend from graduate school from Chile who makes me think I definitely need to see it.
Yeah, it's all on YouTube.
Okay. That's great. That's really good to know. And your 2 films do work so well together, they speak to each other. And one of the things that connects them, which I also really admire how you manage this, I know it is so incredibly hard actually to put your own voice into your film. And because you're telling this much larger story so beautifully, but you're integrating your own biography and subjectivity. You made it fascinating. I have to tell you, as someone who has actually never been to a single country in Latin America, which is just this huge gap in my knowledge and experience, it's you that drew me into your movies both times. It was because I wanted to hear you speak. It's you're the gravitational pull. You're the reason I'm connected and feeling intrigued and pulled in. So I'm curious how you figured this out and how you locate yourself in the stories the way you do.
Well, thank you so much, Vanessa.
Yeah.
It was uh, in when I started this journey with, well, as I told you, I come from much more personal films and very attracted always to essay filmmaking, to the work of Chris Marker, Agnes Varda. In Brazil, we also have our essay filmmakers, João Moreira Salles, Eduardo Coutinho. And I really like the subjectivity of this kind of essay filmmaking because in Latin America, as a screenwriter who I met from Cuba said, there's a much stronger tradition of sound and fury, like a very, which Secret Agent, for example, is much more like that. This extrovert, pungent, magical, realistic, surrealistic tendency. But I identify and I miss sometimes having more subjective questionings, that happen in silence, that happen where there's a bit more nuance than all the carnivalesque, which I so appreciate as well. Both have their place, but it's something that as a shy person, I gravitate towards. And I feel it's what's hardest to share, right, in daily life. These intimate questions that can be very political personal and political or political and personal, which our times have made. The political extremely personal, because we all feel, not all, but almost all, because the people on the far right also feel kidnapped by what they call woke ideology, and we feel kidnapped by their far right ideology. So we're all feeling harassed by the other side to a point that is traumatic, and that's what I wanted to kind of dive into. So with The Edge of Democracy, when I started making it, I first filmed. With every film, it's been like that. I film, and then when I start looking at the material, I try to make sense of it. And I always hesitate putting voiceover and kind of fight against putting voiceover. But with Edge of Democracy, the editor really insisted that I sent her my thoughts that I had shared. And she put it, and when we did a first screening in a kind of rough cut lab, it was what people most responded to, precisely because it was with an international audience and they had no idea who those characters were, and that's how, as you said, they connected to the storyline. And with this film, I also really wanted to do it without the voiceover, because it's basically one more year of work after you've edited. And what I felt is that if just the verite material showed how they moved, but not what moved them, and it could easily become an uncritical amplification of their speech. And that was dangerous as well. And I was fascinated about what were the hidden elements. What had brought evangelicalism to become such a growing religion in Brazil? There was very little material about that. As soon as we began, we asked a journalist to tell us and investigate, a Brazilian journalist, what was the American influence. And she said, that's basically just fake news from liberation theology priests who lost their power. And so we hired two researchers who were evangelical themselves, and they found this trove of material. Nicolás Iglesias, this Uruguayan researcher who my partner Pancho Manu, who's also a co-executive producer in the film, introduced me to, started investigating and found all this material from the fellowship, the family in Wheaton College, that showed how they were sending missionaries to evangelize congressmen. That was completely unknown and unpublished, as well as much of the Cold War effort from Kissinger to the CIA sending missionaries to counteract what they saw as the communist threat of liberation theology.
There are some really poignant observations that you share at the end of the film that I really, really related to and connected with. But I want everyone to see the film, and I don't want to spoil the film, so I'm not going to say what they were. I'll tell you in person when I see you next. But it is wonderful that you're actually on the circuit with The Secret Agent, from Brazil, also being shortlisted. It's a fantastic film also. And we too are huge fans of essay films. I first got introduced to them through Adam Curtis's movies, and I was hooked. He's a particular taste, but I still find it so thought-provoking and intriguing, and an important way to look at the world in a new way, not through the traditional news. Your film is truly beautiful. And one of the things that you capture is this phenomenon that we have here in the United States too, as you've just said, and you make those ties very clear in the film. But evangelical Christianity in Brazil is not only a faith, it's also an economy, a media empire, and a political machine. So I wonder how you thought about it from the start in terms of visualizing something this intangible as influence. You really, really capture it and the grip over the population. I think you do it through, so many scenes of people, life on the street, the emotion of being swept up in this religion. But I wonder how you thought about it, because you really, really make it clear and we feel it.
First, yes, I'm thrilled with all the success of Secret Agent. It's an amazing journey for a Brazilian film. And it's a film that shows in a very creative and subversive way all the violence of the military dictatorship. It's fascinating. So that was thanks to the work of our amazing cinematographers, who really captured so beautifully, both in the favelas and in the mega churches, the religious fervor that was happening. And then it was a challenge in the edit room. At first, I think our tendency was to be kind of judgmental, which can lead to caricaturesque of the faith. And as soon as we had a a first rough cut, that became evident. And so we redirected and was like, no, we have to just not judge and really connect and appreciate. And finding the nuance was really an effort of the edit. And we worked with an amazing team of editors, Eduardo Gripa, Jordana Berg from Brazil, and Vitor Miyashiro, and then co-writers, editors Tina Baz, David Barker, and Nels Bangerter, partly because of the 3-year period time and scheduling problems. And I really like also having this balance of internal and external perspective from the material, because sometimes we're so infused in the political drama that inside Brazil, it's like a soap opera that everyone is following, and it's good to have an outside perspective. So, and what was amazing was how this religious fervor was both present in the churches, but then unexpectedly in the streets, right? In the voting rounds, the amount of people praying in both sides of the political camp felt very apocalyptic. And that's the sad thing about our elections, right? They're becoming less political disputes and more apocalyptic Armageddons, where both sides feel this existential threat if the other side wins.
Yeah, that feels familiar in this country. It's really, really incredible how the film, how you as a director show us the tension between democracy and theocracy. And as you said, you really succeed in not judging. You're very, very open to what is unfolding before you, and you're capturing it in real time. And you truly have made this epic, epic story that's a masterpiece that really applies to all of us in different countries. I don't know how you did it, but formally, how did you figure out how to structure the film so that you feel all these shifts step by step? And it doesn't feel didactic, like we're being told what's happening. You really truly feel we're on the ground with you as you go.
So Jordana did this assembly of all the material we had filmed during 3 years almost. And then I invited David Barker to look at that with me and reflect on how we would write, script it. And we had the idea of having this layer that David Barker suggested to use paintings, and I love that suggestion. And it started with Christian paintings and then became more apocalyptic Christian paintings, and that really emerged from the material itself, where there was so much apocalyptic speech. And at first I had like very ambitious dreams of filming apocalyptic images like dragons, pregnant women, moons turning into blood, and the suggestion of the paintings was just so much better in so many ways, because these paintings first are brutally cinematic. There were the horror films of the Middle Ages, and that imagery in the most original way, and how it was absorbed by Christians for centuries, like populating their unconscious. I remember the first night I slept after reading or looking at these images of apocalyptic paintings. I just had nightmares the entire night with all those images. Images that are very present in the mind of evangelicals that are anti-pictorial, but are reading those texts and imagining those texts in their heads. And so what we knew is that we wouldn't do just the verite. We would have 3 layers, one being the verite following the political unraveling, religious political unraveling in Brazil through a political term of 4 years. The other one, an investigation of what was behind this apocalyptic theology, from the paintings, but also from the United States influence to our times. And then when January 8th happened, the destruction of Brasilia made me reflect on the construction of Brasilia and kind of have this third layer as a metaphor for democracy, from its construction to its destruction, using Brasilia as a metaphor for it.
No, that really, really works. Your cinematography is incredible, actually, because you have these sweeping, sweeping images of the centers of democracy, and then you have very, very personal in the mix with people on the ground, as you've described. And then the paintings are so evocative. And actually, again, for me, they were such a clarifying way in because whatever I've absorbed growing up in this country of Christianity, which is kind of everywhere, it's like in the air we breathe and the water we drink. And I have parents of mixed, I wasn't raised with any religion, to be honest. I have Christian and Jewish influence, and when I go really back in the chart, I have some Spanish Muslim. So, but I really don't have deep religious. I never went to a religious school or anything. So anyway, your film again, it was illuminating what I have sort of unconsciously absorbed all around me forever in my lifetime, and in such a poetic and evocative and deep way. So that's kind of incredible. I wondered about if you had happy accidents, because in documentary, you manage everything you have with this film because you've managed that unexpected, access and moments and nothing scripted. And then you've added layers, as you've said, the visual motifs and the paintings, and then your personal reflections, which is so, so deep and multi-layered. But how did you navigate happy accidents?
First, the cinematography was thanks to the great work of João Atala, Pedro Urano, and Murilo Salazar, who were the cinematographers we worked with. João Atala was the cinematographer also of The Edge of Democracy. And there's some images from Ricardo Stuckert, who is Lula's personal cinematographer. And happy accidents. There were a few. One is the fact that Malafaia, the pastor, first two things actually. One was to be able to film that rally of September 7th. And since the first time Jordana and Vitor did an assembly of it, I couldn't help but see how Malafaia lip-synced Bolsonaro's speech. And I was surprised how no one in the press wrote about it at the time. And then we edited it, and every time I looked at that scene, I was like, I wonder if people are noticing it. And in the last day of Tina Baz encouraged me to write a voiceover, and I did it with Nels. And I'm so happy because then that scene has been included afterwards in both Bolsonaro's condemnation and Malafaia, after the film came out, was added to the federal police's investigation into the coup plot, possibly because of the impact that the film had, and that scene is also mentioned. And then another scene where David Barker actually asked, what happened after the election? What did he say? And I hadn't looked yet. And so we started looking to every one of his videos after, like, he has a YouTube channel and he makes like weekly videos. One week, it's like 2 about religion, 1 about politics, 2 about self-help, 1 about politics. And we found that video where he's basically one of the first to encourage, or maybe the first to encourage people not to protest in front of the military bases, but go in front of Congress.
Wow. I mean, yeah, and it's so integrated so seamlessly in the film. Wow, it's powerful. When you're making the film and it's deeply rooted in something distinctly Brazilian, are you also thinking about how much this will resonate even beyond direct ties with American evangelicals going down to Brazil? Were there ways as a filmmaker, as you're making the film, that you're thinking this will resonate for people in other countries, maybe all over the world, something that's happening right now in our time?
Well, I think it's Tolstoy line, right? Like, concentrate on your village and you will tell about the world. I think is very true, and we didn't need to even make the parallels evident that and I think the reflection is very clear. I had at one moment some images of your January 6th, but it's just so blatantly a, a bad imitation of a bad joke that it wasn't necessary to put. But I think what inspired me to make this film was I was for some time in Egypt and seeing how religious fundamentalism radically changed the country there, how in the 70s it wasn't present and then suddenly it became. And to the point that people are scared of doing anything, was really an alert that when I started seeing the presence of religious fundamentalism in Brazilian politics, I think it really ringed an alarm for me of like, where are we heading?
That's a good next question. Is you have such a deep understanding of this nexus between politics and religion in Brazil, and you have filmed the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff and the rise of Bolsonaro. What do you feel now about the future of democracy in Brazil? Do you have hope? Do you see new forms of resistance?
Well, I think Brazil is leading the way in the fight against the far right, which is very surprising. I didn't expect after being documenting just the fall of democracy to see our institution finally responding with so much force and strength and being used by Stephen Levitsky, your great American specialist on democracy, as an example of how to combat the far right, which is precisely by punishing attacks against democracy, not leaving them unpunished, right? Brazil succeeded where America failed, Stephen Levitsky said so brilliantly in a New York Times article, which is punishing a president who attacked democracy. And then that president tried to punish Brazil for doing the right thing, and uh, Brazil stood up and got respect from your president for doing that for the time being. No, yeah, so it's a hopeful moment for Brazilian democracy. Of course, we're all concerned of what is happening in Latin America right now with the invasion of Venezuela. Of course, Maduro was a dictator, and the thing is that it is a sovereign country, and we know what the record has been for invading sovereign countries in the past. And so it's concerning after so many decades of coups in Latin America for this to come back in such a obscene way.
Well said. It's completely obscene and horrifying. I'm grateful for you and your work and your film, and it's true. It is a lesson for how to hold on to democracy and why it matters so much. You show it in both your films, but also how to combat the far right, which is extremely dangerous, especially when they're attacking democracy and they're not about supporting it. So, thank you so much, Petra. I was going to ask you to tell people where to see your film, but I believe we just say Netflix.
Yeah, so please help spread the word that Apocalypse in the Tropics is available on Netflix and encourage people to see it if you can.
And encourage people to find you on the road if they can, I would say. It's
Yeah,
extraordinarily special to be able to meet you in person and listen to you speak about your film, so I hope people do they check out your website, or how do they find you on the
in
road?
Instagram, I usually put the next places where we'll be screening.
Okay, so it's Petra Costa Instagram?
It's Petra Costa and letter L, Petra Costal.
Okay, and on Instagram, great. So, well, everyone look for you and support you and see your film and learn from it in the best possible way.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Vanessa.
thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Okay, thanks.